Happy.
She's okay.
What?
She's okay.
She's what? Yeah, she just had to be out of town. She'll be back in the show. To the third one, fourth one, fifth one. This is also good, but this is one-sided, so it's very big. It's very heavy. Okay, I'm gonna bring this out. And a few more in Hebrew, so somebody we don't have enough to go around. We'll use the Hebrew until tomorrow. This is good. But one's this copy. This copy is good. Just it's one-sided, so it's big, but it's good. Simcha, I don't know if you're on, but did you find the mimer? It's a Chayla Gimel of my Maimor Kotim of the Rebbe. So there are 6 volumes of Maimorim of the Rebbe, even though the Rebbe said Maimorim for 42 years, but most of the Maimorim that the Rebbe said, the Rebbe didn't edit. We have all those Maimorim, but they're unedited. So I just want to point out that this is very different than the way it was in previous generations. In previous generations, the Rebbe themselves would say a Maimer, and then they themselves would write it down. And everyone was very surprised when the Rebbe said the Maimer. And when it came to writing it down, he called Rabbi Khan. Rabbi Khan was the Rebbe's chesed, the one who would review all the Farbrengens and the Sichas. He wrote up the Maimorim and the Sichas. He had a phenomenal memory and a phenomenal deep brain, like nobody can compare to him. And the Rebbe asked him that he should write up the 2 Maimorim. And he said to the Rebbe, but shouldn't the Rebbe himself write it, like all the Rabbeim? But the Rebbe refused and said, you write it up and I'll edit it. From 1951, the first 2 Maimorim the Rebbe edited, until 1987 approximately, there was very few selected Maimorim that were edited by the Rebbe, and it all fit into one volume. It's the first volume called Maimorim Mulukotim. From 1987, the Rebbe started to edit Maimorim that he said years back, but edit them, and they should be printed and studied in honor of a yontif that's coming up. And from that point on, we have another 5 volumes of Maimorim. In other words, in these few years, more Maimorim were edited by the Rebbe than in all the 37 years before. So this is one of them. The date that the Rebbe said it was Yud Aleph Nisan, Tavshin Lamed Aleph, 1971. I had the chus to be there and to hear the Rebbe saying it. And then in 1989, in honor of Yud Aleph Nisan, it was printed. So you'll find it in that volume. It was printed in honor of Yud Aleph Nisan, Tavshin Lamed Tes. Does everyone have a copy now? Yeah? Okay. So the pasuk that it begins with is related to Yud Aleph Nisan. Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th day in Nisan. Yes, it's the Rebbe's birthday, but in the month of Nisan, there's a minhag, there's a custom that every single day we read something from the Torah, from Parshat Nosai. What do we read? When the Yidden were in the desert, and they built the Mishkan, they made a Chanukas HaMizbeach, Chanukas HaMishkan, which means they did celebrate the inauguration of the Mishkan. When was the first day that they started doing the Avodah in the Mishkan? Rosh Chodesh Nisan. How did they celebrate it? For the next 12 days, every single day, one Nasi, one leader of a tribe, brought a special carbon. And that was the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the 12th day. And after that began all the regular Avodah ongoing. But the inauguration, the beginning, was the first 12 days, from the first day of Chodesh Nisan till the 12th day of Nisan. So our custom is that every day we read the Parsha to ourselves. We read it, what it says about the first day, then the second day we read what it says about the second day, the third day we read what it says the third day. The Rebbe's birthday is on the 11th day. Who brought a carbon on the 11th day? The head of the tribe of Asher. And that's what this pasuk is saying. V'yoyim ashtei asar, on the 11th day of Nisan, who brought the carbon? Nasi l'bnei Asher, the prince of Asher. In other words, this wasn't a carbon that was brought by people of the tribe. It was brought only by the Nasi of the entire tribe. It says in the Medrash, Kol Hashvatim, all the tribes, the Shem Gulas and Shal Yisrael, when they brought a carbon. So I don't have any more of this, but I'll give you the Hebrew, and tomorrow we should have more copies for the English.
Maybe I can get it.
You might remember we spoke about this Hanukkah, that one of the things that we find in the Torah when it comes to these 12 tribes is something which on the surface is almost like shocking. What am I referring to? In the Chumash, every word is precise. Every letter is precise. There are so many halachas that we know, and the basis for the halacha is an extra letter. This letter didn't have to be there. And being that the Torah put in this letter, it teaches us something. Well, this word didn't have to be there. And being that the Torah puts in this extra word, it must teach us something. In this case, we find not only an extra letter, an extra word, extra hundreds of words. Why? Because it says, and you'll probably remember from Hanukkah, it says that the tribe, the first tribe to bring a carbon, was bringing this and this carbon. He brought so much silver of this and bowls, and he brought spoons, and he brought the sacrifice. And then it says on the second day, the second tribe brought, and it says exactly the same thing, precisely, not missing one detail. Repeats every single detail, which is about 3 or 4 psukim. The third tribe says again, and the third day, the third tribe brought exactly every single detail. And it could have said just what the first tribe did on the first day. And then it should say, and the next 11 days, they did the same. And yet it's repeated. So we explained what it says in Chassidus, that even though the exact carbon was brought, but it wasn't the same carbon, because the intention, the meaning, the purpose, the spiritual accomplishment was different with each tribe. And that's according to Chassidus and according to Kabbalah. But the truth is, even if you look in the Medrash, which is the revealed part of Torah, we see that as well. And the Medrash says that each Nasi had something else in mind when they brought the carbon, and it's related to their name. And in other words, Reuven, there's something in the name that shows the uniqueness of that tribe. Shimon, there's something in the name that shows the uniqueness of that tribe. Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, and so on. And the Medrash says that all of them, whatever they had in mind, all of them had in mind something which is related to Geula, to redemption. That's how this begins. Kol Hashvatim, all the tribes, the Shem Gulas and Shal Yisrael. the names are related to the redemption of Yidden, number one. And another thing, l'shem shvachan, and also is related to shvachan, to the praise of the Yidden. But for each shevet, it explains it in a different way, which is one of the sources in the Medrash, how each shevet is unique. And remember, this is also the answer to the question that people ask, why do we have 12 shvatim? Isn't that something which only leaves room for division? Why do we have to divide the nation into 12 tribes? Why can't it just be one nation? We're all children of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and not divide us in 12 tribes. And the answer is that the 12 tribes is supposed to actually strengthen our unity if things are done right, because it's not division, it's everyone serving Hashem in a certain unique path. And it's no different than a symphony, where this one is playing this instrument, that one is playing the other instrument, the third one, a third instrument. And together, it creates the most beautiful, beautiful musical sound. The human body is made up of hands and feet and eyes and nose and mouth, a brain, a heart, so many different organs. And together you have a perfect person. So each tribe is a unique path in serving Hashem, and it's expressed in the name. So the name is related to the redemption. It's also related to the praise of Yidden. But each one has a different angle of redemption and a different angle in the praise. So when it comes to the tribe of Asher, how does it apply? Asher also, his name is related to Gula. Where do we see this? There's a pasuk that says, "V'ishru eschem kol hagoyim kisiu atem eretz chepes omer Hashem tzois." And all the nations shall praise you, for you will be a land of desire. You'll be a land that they'll desire. They'll see the beauty and the what's so special about Yidden. So said Hashem, the commander of twice of the legions of the army. So that's where we see that Asher is connected to Geula, because when will it happen that the nations of the world be praising Yidden? We haven't seen it yet. We didn't see it in Russia. We didn't see it in France. We didn't see it in Germany. We didn't see it up until now. Even though now we're beginning to hear a little bit of this kind of language, but when will we see it clearly across the board? That'll be when Mashiach comes. So it's Geula. Where do we see that Asher's name is connected to the praise? L'shem shvachan, also the praise. As it says, Ashrei ha'om shekoch aloi, Ashrei ha'om she'Hashem alakov. Fortunate is the nation that this is their lot, that we're connected to Hashem. Fortunate is the nation that Hashem is their God. So the word Ashrei could mean fortunate, and it could also mean praise. So it's connected to Geula and connected to redemption. Then the Medrash continues, and what is the good fortune? What are we saying we're so fortunate? It's only one thing. We're fortunate because we chose Hashem to be our God. And another thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us that we should be his cherished nation. And therefore, understand this is still the words of the Medrash. When the tribe of Asher, the prince of the tribe of Asher, came to bring his korban, he could what was he thinking about the choosing? HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us from all the nations, and that's what he was thinking, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us from all the nations. And this is also written in the Chumash. There's a pasuk in Chumash, in Devarim, and Hashem chose you to be his cherished nation, his cherished people. This is the Medrash. Now, as usual, the Maimer begins with raising questions on this Medrash, which will lead us to a deeper understanding. This requires explanation. The Betchilas Inyan, when the Medrash initially brings up this subject, The Medrash says, why are the Yidden so fortunate? Because they chose HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why they're fortunate. Let's turn the page. After that, the Medrash continues, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose them. It appears to be that's a secondary point. The first point is that Yidden chose HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why they're fortunate. And then and also Hashem chose them. That's like the second point. But after that, the same Medrash continues, and the Medrash says, so when Asher brought his carbon, Hikr Karbane, what was he thinking? What was his kavana when he brought the carbon? Hashem Abchira, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bacha B'Yisrael, that Hashem chose us. He doesn't even mention that we chose him. So basically the question is, which is the primary and which is secondary? Is the primary thing that we chose him, or is the primary thing that he chose us? That's question number one. Question number two. The term bechira, which means to choose, is only relevant when you're choosing between two things that are equal, and you choose one over the other. This is a very deep subject in Chassidus. He's not going into it in this mimer, so I also won't. Besides the fact that I'll get so tangled up, I won't be able to krich out. So I'm just going to say what it means on a general level. And that is that when you say that I took this because I chose it, that means I had the option to choose A or B, and I chose A over B. The real true definition of choosing can only be when you have two things that are equal. For example, if a person has the option to take to open a business that's going to bring in $100,000 a year, or open a business that's going to bring $1 million a year, and he chooses the one that'll bring $1 million a year. It's like not even a question. It's as if before he chose, I can tell you what he's going to choose. If a person has to choose between one thing and the other, and one of them has an advantage over the other, and that's what I'm looking for, so it's not because I chose, it's because what I'm looking for is here, not there. But what if I'm looking for is here and there? I can go here and I can go there and have both the same thing. And I decide I'll take this. That means the reason why I took A is because I chose. That's because I made the choice. Because other than that, I didn't have to go here or there. They're both the same. So real, true choice is when you have two things that are equal. So the question is, two things that are equal means that one of them has an advantage that the other one doesn't have, doesn't really make sense. Or when one has an advantage over the other. For example, this work, this job, or this business will bring me $1 million, but it'll come along with that aggravation. This business will be $100,000, but it'll be more pleasant, won't be so hard. So one has an advantage over the other. So I make the choice, I'd rather take this advantage over that advantage. So again, it's a choice. Like right now, where would you like to be? Here in Brooklyn or in Florida?
Florida.
I knew you were going to say that. So why are you here? Obviously, there's a reason why you're here. There's an advantage here over Florida, and there's an advantage in Florida over Brooklyn. Besides the weather, Florida today is better than Brooklyn, even though there's tornadoes there now. And besides other things, there are things I can have here I don't have there. So then I have to make the choice. Which one is more important to me? I'm choosing. Or two things that are equal. But when it comes to Hashem, well, you have to choose between Hashem and lahavdil, other gods. What kind of choice is there? How could we say the Yidden chose HaKadosh Baruch Hu? There's nothing to choose from. There's only Hashem. The other gods are nothing, should be nothing. So who are you choosing from? How does the term choice fit in? That's regarding us choosing Hashem. When we say that Yidden, that Kadosh Baruch Hu chose us, we know that the root and the source of a Yid and his neshama is rooted in the highest levels in the spiritual realm, and therefore Hashem chose us because he is more connected to the nation. Even in Tanya, Alter Rebbe in Tanya, in chapter 49, raises this question, and he says, what does it mean that Hashem chooses us? It means it chooses the guf. On the neshama level, yes, there's a big difference between the neshama of a Yid and the neshama of the nations of the world. But on a gashmizik level, inside the body, we are the same physical body, the same physical structure, the same physical organs and veins and bones and whatever there is. All the nations of the world have the same thing. And the Alter Rebbe says, and the truth is that even that isn't the same. There's a difference, but we don't see that difference. But at least it looks like that. Hanidme b'chomerusa, it appears on the outside, it resembles the bodies of all the nations. So the Rebbe says that's also not sufficient. The fact that the guf of a Yid looks identical, it resembles, it's identical to the nations of the world. That's an explanation maybe for humans who can't see the difference. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who knows the difference, so both things are very difficult to understand. How does it make sense to say we chose Hashem? And how does it make sense to say that Hashem chose us? That's the first ois with these two questions. So one question is, which of the two is most important in terms of choosing? The fact that Hashem chose us or we chose him. And the second question, or the second two questions are, how could we use the term choosing in reference to us choosing Hashem or Hashem choosing us? Page 189. So we'll understand this by first prefacing. There's a pasuk. This pasuk is an Eicha, where it says Chelki Havaya Omra Nafshi, which means Hashem is my portion. My soul says Hashem is my portion. He's mine. In order to explain these words, the Medrash gives a mashal. Think of a king that he goes into a certain country, and when a king travels, he travels with his ministers. He comes along with dukes, prefects, commanders. I don't know what the difference in all these levels are, but there are different levels of ministers in the royal kingdom. And he's coming with these three kinds of ministers. Those that are called duchsin, those that are called parchin, and those that are called Yisraelututin. What happened? Chadoma, one person, when he sees the king walking in with these three ministers, there's one person that says, Ano Nasav Duchsin. I'm going to take one of the duchsin, the minister, I'll take him as my connection. I'm going to connect to him. Chadoma, another one says, Ano Nasav Parchin Gabe. I'll take the other minister. I guess this minister resonates with me and I'm going to be connecting to him. And the third one says, I'll take the third officer, the third minister. But there was one person, he was a smart person, and he said, I'm going to take the king himself. You guys are taking ministers, and I'm going to connect to the king. Why? The chul, and the ministers, they can all be replaced. One day the king could decide, I don't want you as my minister, and he chooses another minister, so he's gone. So all the ministers, they are in a sense pending. They're not 100% solid in their position. But the king himself, he's not replaceable. So I'd rather choose the king than the ministers. What's the mashal? The same is with the nations of the world. One of Hashem's ministers and servants is the sun. So there's some nations that say, we're going to worship the sun. And some are going to say we're going to worship the moon. I think the third one is maybe the constellations. The third one's going to say they're going to serve the constellations, worship the constellations. Our Yisrael, but Yisrael, they're like the fourth person, who is the peacock, the smart person. And then he says, Einan Eidun Ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll choose only Hashem. And that's what it means. Chelki Avaya Omra Nafshi. They didn't say, Hashem is my portion. I'm like the other nations. They're going to choose ministers. I'm going to choose Hashem. That's the Medrash. Mashal. We do Hadim was page 190. It's well known the questions on this Medrash. What are the questions? First of all, Gam Mi Sheini Pikach. It seems the Medrash was one person. He was really smart, very perceptive, clever, very smart person, and he knew what to choose. Even if you're not smart, even a teenage, even a little child knows that the king is greater than all the ministers. What do you need someone who's very smart to choose the king? Every shmendrik would know that you choose the king, not the minister. What kind of comparison is that? That's number one. Number two, the reason that he gives to choose the king also raises a question. What's the reason? The reason is that all the ministers could be replaced. And the king can be replaced. And even if it were possible that whoever becomes a minister is a minister forever and can never be replaced, it still would be understood with Pashtus that the king is greater than all these people. It's not because of replacement. In level, a minister doesn't have the power and the capacity that a king has. As it says in the pasuk, this is a pasuk in Chumash in Tanakh, Shmuel, where it talks about Shaul HaMelech. When Hashem told Shmuel to choose a king, and he should choose Shaul, he said, "What Shaul? He was very tall. He was taller than everybody else. Mishichma l'mayla, his shoulders and up, went taller than the other people." So on the subject, on the surface, it appears as if, oh, you want to choose a king? Tall somebody that really looks to be a king, tall person. But of course, this is Torah, and just because he's tall, that's not a reason. I think I once told you I heard two children arguing about their father. One kid said, "My father is older than your father." The other one screams, "No, my father is older than your father." 6-year-olds. And then one of them says, "How could your father be older than my father? My father is so much taller than your father." So you could be taller and you could be short, and the short person could be infinitely greater than the tall person. Tall and short is just a physical measurement. The Rebbe once told a story. It was actually connected to Yud Aleph Nissen. The Ramah, the one who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Moshe Isserlish, he was very young when he became the Rav. And he became the Rav in Krakow. Krakow wasn't an ordinary city. That was one of the biggest, important cities in Poland. The greatest rabbis held that position. And then they took him as the new Rav. He was very young. I remember hearing that he passed away on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer. He wrote 33 Sfarim, and he was 33-year-old when he passed away. So how old was he when he became a Rav? I guess in his early 20s or maybe younger. He was also short and skinny. And unfortunately, it's very common in most communities that there are people who have a lot of money, a lot of power, and they don't want to have a rabbi telling them what to do. And they make trouble. They don't want to listen to the Rav, and they have their own opinion. And he had such a person. So he said to him, "I might be very short and thin, but the chair that I'm sitting on is very big." In other words, I'm saying it with the authority that I'm the Rav of the city, and therefore you better back off. So it's not the size. So what does it mean? So he continues. It means Shagam Shichma Shalom Melech Hainu Hamidis Shenim Shochem Haseichel Shebaroi Shalom Atem Amenu Ugavoya Yosef Marei Shel Kol Adam. The shoulders represent midas, because one shoulder leads to the right hand, that's chesed. The other shoulder leads to the left hand, that's gvura. So the shoulders represent chesed and gvura, which are the midas. By the way, I remember I was teaching this and someone said that this must be the source of the expression. In English, they say, this person is head and shoulders above the rest. That's mamish the words that it says there. He is shoulders above the rest. His shoulder is higher than other people's heads. What does it mean? His midas are of greater quality than other people's seichel. We know that in a person, there's intellect, there's emotion. Emotion is something which is lower than intellect, as we see that even animals have emotion. Animals could love, animals could be angry, animals have feelings, but animals don't have intellect like a human being. They have intellect, but it's something very different. So a human being is his greatness is, his uniqueness is the intellect. Intellect in a person is higher than emotion. What he's saying here is that the emotion, the quality of Rishol's emotion was so great, so phenomenal, that it was superior to the intellect of everybody else. I mean, the way you have to think about it is, let me ask you a question. Let me give an example. We just finished saying that animals also have a certain degree of intellect. We see that dogs, cats. The Gemara says that a fox is the smartest or the slyest of the animals. There's a certain degree of intellect. But the quality, the sort of the soul quality, the neshama quality, the nefesh quality of an animal's emotion, right, the animal's intellect, is even lower than the soul quality of a human's emotion. Our nefesh, our neshama, our emotions have more quality to it than the intellect of an animal. Because after all, our emotions have intellect in it, and it's connected to intellect. It's born out of intellect. So our intellect, rather, our emotion is superior to an animal's intellect. So too, his emotion was superior to other people's intellect. So Begashmias, his shoulders was above other people's head. That's what it means. So a melech is so much greater. We're talking about a true king, not chas v'shalom, a king that was a dictator and used brutal force to make people do what he wants. A real king like David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, Moshe Rabbeinu, and all the other kings. So the king is so much greater than the other people. And when we say than the other people, even the greatest ministers in the kingdom, he says, is the king's show is greater than the whole nation, which means even greater than all the ministers. So that's the reason why I would choose the king over the ministers. So why do we give the reason? Because all the others are replaceable. And the king is not replaceable. That's not the reason. The reason is because the king is so much greater than the other people. Okay. This part is easy to follow. Now we'll go into Gimel. This mimer is a very, let's say, structured mimer. It goes from level to level to level, the way he explains what true Emunah is, as we'll see as we go along. It's one of the most famous mimarim of the Rebbe. Every chassid makes an effort to know this mimer, to learn this mimer. So let's go now to Gimel. So first it goes to answer this question. In the early generations, those people that worshipped idols, they worshipped the stars, they worshipped the constellations. What were they thinking? The first generations, that wasn't so far away from the beginning of creation. They didn't recognize that Hashem exists. What were they thinking? Yadu, they knew that all the hashpa, all the sustenance that is transmitted and flows to the world, and it goes through the stars and the constellations. And this is even according to Torah. There's a pasuk in Chumash that says, "Mimeged tvois shemesh, mimeged gerish yirachim," where it means that the sun and the moon, they have an effect on the crop that grows in the field. So we see that, yes, Hashem gives hashpah through the sun, through the moon, and through the constellations. But they understood that they understood that they're not doing this independently. Page 194. They believed in Hashem. Hashem is the creator. Hashem is the source. And they believe that Hashem did this, and he only did it, channeled his hashpah through the stars and the moons and the constellation. So what was their mistake? Their mistake was they thought that the stars and the moon and the constellations that give hashpah to the world, they do it in their own free choice, which means they can choose to give a lot, to give a little, to give this person, to give that person. Hashem appointed them to be in charge, and now they make the choices. They did not know the truth, that they have absolutely no choice at all. They're like the hands of a chopper. He uses this term a lot because it's a term that's found in Tanakh. It's a term that's found in Tanakh. There's a pasuk in Yeshayahu where it says that everything is like an axe in the hands of a chopper. So just like the axe has no choice, the axe chops down a tree.
What is that?
Axe?
You know,
Garzen. Good. In fact, it says ki garzen biyad hachotzer. Yeah. Garzen is like garzen, same word. And that's why they bow down to the stars and the constellations and they worship them. Page 195. Kilafita usam, according to their mistaken idea, that they thought they have a choice. So we should really thank them. In other words, they felt if they choose, for example, a person has a business and he's succeeding, and he feels that the reason why he's succeeding was because he opened the business during this one of the constellations. So obviously these constellations are helping him. Wait, and not Hashem? No, of course Hashem. But Hashem gave over the authority to the constellations to do, and they chose to help me. So I should thank them. And this is Al Derech Chamr L'Moreh Tevus L'Shakya. It's a quote from Gemara, which goes like this: the wine belongs to the owner, but the thank you goes to the waiter. So if you're sitting at a wedding and the waiter brings you food, or you're sitting in a restaurant, you say thank you to the waiter. You don't pick yourself up and you say, where's the boss, the owner here? Let me say thank you. Why waiter? It's not his food. It's not his restaurant. The answer is, but he's bringing me the food. And we think of it, even though it's not his food, but he could bring it sooner, he could bring it later. He could, by mistake, pour the soup all over me. He could give me a bigger portion, a smaller portion. So the fact that he does it nicely, politely, pleasantly, some saying thank you. They even give him a tip at the end. What does it mean? The owner is really the person who owns the restaurant. But the thank you comes to the one who's actually delivering it to me. So they said like this, the owner is Hashem, but the thank you goes to the one that's delivering it to me, which is the stars.
When do we think the story?
We don't. The people who worship idols, they thank the stars. That's the point. Why they did that? Because they had a mistaken view of how Hashem brings his influence to the world. So what is the difference between a waiter and the stars? The stars have no free choice. And it would be just like if somebody writes out a check for $10,000 and hands it to you, you wouldn't walk over to the pen and say, thank you so much. It's really so nice. But the pen actually wrote it. Without the pen, he couldn't write out the check. The pen is nothing. But when a person gives you something like the waiter, he does have free choice. Hashem set it up that he has choices, and therefore I'm thanking him for choosing to do this to me in a very pleasant way. Okay, we'll stop here on page 196 to be continued tomorrow. Hashem. Hopefully we'll have the copy straightened out. We believe that it exists, but we don't believe that they have any kind of independent power to make things happen independently. Right, because that would be idol worship.
I came in a little bit late. What is the name?
The minor is V'yayim Ashrei Asar. I'll give it to you in the Hebrew version. Hopefully tomorrow we'll have it in English. This is the Hebrew version. I forgot to do the attendance. Would you mind checking off? Everybody over there?
We're holding in volume 1. In just a few minutes. Anyone remember what we're learning? Oh, okay, that's already a good sign. Yeah. Yep, exactly. This is the Torah approach. One more minute, make sure everyone's here. Okay. Like we usually start, we'll start with a review. We're holding chapter 29, Siman Chavtes. The chapter starts on page 196. So,